Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me for another episode of my Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell. And I know that my listeners are individuals who are committed to working on their own development and also helping others work on theirs. And sometimes that leads to striving and pushing hard. And my guest today is going to turn that kind of activity on its head and offer an alternative approach that I personally love and intend to learn more about today. So I want to welcome to my show, Dr. Jeff Spencer. Jeff, so glad to have you with me today.
Well, thank you, Meredith. What a pleasure. What an honor. Thank you.
Well, I have to give the backstory because I heard Jeff when he was a guest on my dear friend, Mark Silverman's podcast, The Rising Leader. And I immediately resonated with what Jeff was saying. And I reached out to him. I didn't even ask Mark for an introduction. I thought, I want to connect with Jeff right away and invite him to be a guest. And our first conversation was just amazing. It was everything that I guess I expected it to be, Jeff, because you're such an extraordinary human being. And so I'm just so delighted to be able to bring you to my audience today.
Well, thank you. And channeling goes a long way. So I look forward to seeing what comes out and deeply appreciate the opportunity.
Yes. Well, let me tell my audience why I'm so excited, besides having heard you before, some of your credentials. Dr. Jeff Spencer builds champions. He has spent more than 400,000 hours mastering the art and science of full potential. His extraordinary track record includes helping athletes win gold medals, entrepreneurs dominate their fields, and business titans become iconic. All these accomplishments come from his own experience as an Olympic cyclist, author, hot glass artist, sports scientist, doctor, husband, and father. Jeff's clients include names that will be very familiar to you, like Tiger Woods and U2, Nike, Hitachi, and Bulletproof. His proudest achievement is the raising of his adopted daughter, Kin, with his wife, Kristina. I love that about you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your journey from, becoming an Olympic gold medalist yourself and how you now work with others to have this champion mindset.
Well, as a kid, I had the self-start gene, no doubt. And when I was 7, I thought it'd be cool to be an Olympian. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And when I was 11, I went on a bicycle ride with a competitive cycling club. And at the end of that 25-mile ride, after I hustled a bicycle, the other guy, they were tired and I wasn't. So we sort of figured, well, maybe cycling chose me to be the vehicle by which I would become an Olympian. And so I had the good fortune of meeting my first angel, which was my cycling coach, a 3-time Olympian, 5-time national champion. And he taught me the skill of winning. And he also said that I want you to come and be around my training group, which was world champions and Olympic champions. And he said, I can't put anything into you that isn't already there. But if you being in the proximity of these established and proven champions, you have a resonance and a connection and understand what they're saying, then you could become your own champion, which I did. I had that capacity to do that. So 21 years, actually 10 years later, I did become an Olympian competing as a sprint cyclist in the 1972 Munich Olympics. And that was an important milestone for me. But simultaneously, I was a scholarship student, even though I come from a welfare family, at the University of Southern California, where I was studying sports science. And there was a natural connection with that as I was training to become an Olympian. And simultaneously, when I was 18, I met my second angel, which was a mentor, a Victorian, who I apprenticed to as he, the glass master, helping him create his glass masterpieces, among other things. And he taught me the nuances of life and soul. He played classical music to me. He played and shared with me the great literary works of history. He shared with me the poets, the playwrights, the philosophers. He said, I need to fill you up on this stuff. And I had the ability to absorb that. So you could see that that was sort of a unique composite to the athletic side of me. And then the humanity side came from my third angel, which was a person that helped me in the cycling world get to where I needed to get to through opening doors. And he was a concentration camp survivor in World War II. But the most important feature about that is that he had no malice. He had no ill will. He was the most reconciled human I ever met. And I wanted to have part of his dignity. So those kind of three angels helped cultivate me when I didn't get any help from my parents or anybody else, because I always thought, well, kids are just somehow they raise themselves. I never thought that parents were there to help in any way, shape, or form. So, with that, I got my master's degree in sports science. I become an Olympian, so I know how to win. I know how to win at the highest level. I know exactly what the experience is in the rarefied air of the top, 0.1%, because that's what I've been around my entire life, and that's what my DNA is calibrated to. So naturally, I helped athletes win a bunch of gold medals, and I help business people, whether it's locker room or boardroom, it doesn't matter. They're both need to become their own champions. And so that's how that got started. But I think the unique characteristic here is that because I knew how to win, because I'd done it at the highest level, that's my space, and I'm calibrated towards that. And because of my experience and understanding how to craft and create a body that can push and stay in the game over the long term to develop our capacity and have the longest runway to create the best legacy. And then with the insight that I have, knowing how to craft the path forward from where we are to where we want to get to, I became a jack of all trades and master at kind of all of them. I was the master of the whole. So people like you two and Lance and some of the other household words that I've worked with, they realize, well, I don't need to go to 10 experts. I can go to Jeff because he's proficient in everything, and he knows how to craft for me my personalized path forward in a very streamlined way that's actually implementable. So that's how I got from kind of there to here.
One of the key things that I mentioned in the introduction that I want to pursue with you is this idea of push, push, push. When we think of Olympian athletes and others that are really working on challenges, it's like, you got to keep at it. You got to keep at it, keep persevering. And yet you have a different approach. And I would love for you to talk about that, because I think for those of us that tend to be high achievers and doers, that what you have to say is really important.
Well, thank you. There is a bit of a mythology here, and to human nature, which is fear-based, actually, we can see how trying harder would create better survival possibilities, but that's not exactly how it works, because to manifest our fullest potential, which is kind of what my life is devoted to, it's really about right thing at the right time is what it is. And so how do you get the right thing? You don't chase everything, but to me, you stand in receivership, meaning that you don't try to push and look under every rock, because that takes way too much energy. Hyperfocus exhausts the mind. It creates neural fatigue. It leads to massive frustration. But if you know how to pull back and remain in receivership so that potential ideas can show up spontaneously in our conscious awareness, which they do if we're patient and quiet enough while we're doing the tasks of daily living and the menial tasks of business development, then we get truly a shortcut to the winner's circle. So again, what I call the hustler's hoax, meaning the hoax is that you try harder and hyperfocus is the holy grail to full potential. I could tell you it's not, because if you're chasing with too much detail and you're chasing too many shiny lures because you're afraid you're going to get left behind, you're going to be so enmeshed in confusion and not in uncertainty about what to do when, that there's no possible way that you can connect with those dots that can get you to where you want to get to in least time, at least effort. It's complete mythology, and it goes against everything our human nature tells us. But it's like, I don't know, I feel like I don't want to be natural, meaning whining, complaining, wanting. I'd like to be kind of supernatural to be gracious and dignified with standing in the presence of possibility to be revealed. Because I mean, quite honestly, life never happens the way that we think that it's going to. We have all these elaborate plans and we have these details, and then 90% of it never happens. And so there has to be a flexibility to remain in present reality, to adjust the trajectory as we move forward by adapting our plans to current reality. And current reality is a presence of being where we understand the context, we understand what our assets and our readiness are to be able to apply that one or two things that have to go right to move things forward. So again, I get the hustle idea, but it's never proven itself to be true. And I can tell you there are two things that come from that. Number one, you're going to blow yourself up, you're going to burn yourself out. It may take you 20 years to get there, but when you get to 40 and you've run out of gas, then that's a problem, because that's the point where you should be actually now putting the afterburners on, because you have the methodology all worked out. And so the other side of this that I'll sort of finish with here is that when we get to that place where we can't push any harder because what's missing is untapped potential, it's not closing the gap by working harder towards something that's unknown. It isn't that. And what happens when we hit that barrier, what do we think? Well, that's my full potential. No, it's not your full potential. It means that you don't have the missing piece to move forward. But we tragically think, well, hey, that's my limit because I'm pushing as hard as I can. I can't go any further. Therefore, that must be my full potential. So what everybody does, they stop and then they pull back, and they're living life at a significant level way below what their true potential really is, because they've been tricked into thinking that pushing harder is the holy grail. And I'm saying, yeah, it's part of it. You got to push when you got to push, but that's not the secret to longevity and long-term prosperity and great legacy creation.
There's so much to unpack there. I want to go back to this statement you made about hyperfocus, because we often hear, you've got to eliminate distractions and not, get off your goal of what you want to do. So what's your explanation or perception around this idea of having focus, like winning a gold medal, as an example, versus what you're calling hyperfocus?
Well, again, hyperfocus, let's take an example. Hyperfocus would be like an electron microscope looking at a detail and staying riveted to the detail. I get that. But if you look at peripheral gaze, there's still another 270 degrees of unfocused periphery. And in my experience, in the unfocused periphery is where you see two things. Number one, you see revelations and shortcuts that your hyperfocus will not provide you with, because hyperfocus is completing a task in front of you. It's not in receptivity of better ways, more efficient means to get to somewhere. I get why we would think that would work, but it kind of like doesn't at a certain point. The second thing is that blind sides are always starting to form in the periphery. We all know that when something happens, it's tragic. We look back and we kind of say, well, there actually were warning signs. I did see that, but I didn't pay any attention because I thought they were so small. So I have a term called GOCUS, GOCUS, which stands for goal focus. So goal focus is a bit like a chameleon, where it has one eye on things that are happening in front of us, like executing the tasks of the daily living, or a particular segment or activity related to goal achievement and progress. But simultaneously, the other eye of the chameleon is doing a survey sweep of the environment, looking off into the distance and under the horizon for good possibilities and opportunities and for danger that can be avoided. And when we can live with that GOCUS presence of being, where we're getting stuff done throughout the day, but we're still available for better options and avoiding preventable problems, then we have the most efficient way of negotiating the path from where we are to where we want to get to. And that's not natural. That is not a natural state of being. Quite honestly, we have this internal resistance to habit change that require time and effort. We have kind of a red kryptonite response to that. But, again, the traditional way of doing things head down, oftentimes it leads in a catastrophic failure either from a relationship failure, or it could be a financial ruin, or it could be a health event, because we buried ourselves so deep, so hard with hyper focus, we're not seeing what's happening in the periphery. So
That's good. I'm curious because you help train people to have a champion mindset, and you were just saying a lot of things kind of go against our
100%.
natural tendency. So, what are some of the distinctions there that someone might be able to listen to this and evaluate where they are? I won't say on a continuum, but I don't know if it's an either or. It's a kind of situation, our human nature, our natural tendency versus champion mindset.
Well, a couple things here. There's a biological warfare phenomena that's happening every second in our life that's competing for our decision making. And we have a natural biology, a survival biology that's hardwired into us that has to be there in times of imminent psychological and physical danger. There needs to be something that's faster than we could think that gets us out of harm's way. And that's there. I think that's a well-known fact, and it gets first dibs at every moment of our life. But survival is a fear-based response to circumstances. It's not a path to creating a life of excellence. And so on the other side of that aisle, simultaneously, in direct, I would say opposition to it, but the other side of the equation is that if what the experts and the scientists tell us is true, is that our highest instinct, which is biologically hardwired, so there's no argument about it, is we think, well, yeah, it's procreation and it's food. Well, actually, it's not. It's seeking, seeking, seeking. Like, what does that mean? Well, that means that we're always kind of on the hunt, looking for things. And I believe that if we look at like Maslow's hierarchy, who says that self-actualization is kind of like the Rosetta Stone of life itself, well, then you can see that we're hardwired for that as well. But if you're living as a survivor out of your fear-based survival instincts and impulses, which come naturally to us, and we don't kind of live from that instinct seeker self that wants to create a life of value, meaning, and contribution, this is the war that we all fight day in and day out. I think if we really look at our lives, most of our lives are spent not in a place of tranquility of being, but really kind of in a state of indecisiveness about which way we should go. And am I doing the right thing? Am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? And to me, that represents this ongoing war. And so this is a really important distinction, because when we're talking about the survival part of how we're hardwired, that's a mindset. That is a rigid set of responses to circumstances that are part of our hardwired human nature. But we have what I call the champion's mind. I didn't say mindset, I said mind, because the mind is like an organism that has the ability to look at, recognize, acknowledge, retrieve, assimilate, collate, store, interpret, and transmit information thoughtfully. And that is different than a mindset rigidity. It's the ability to look at current reality, measure the reality of the circumstances and the context against our ambitions and our state of readiness, to thoughtfully respond to it in a way that advances us forward towards goal completion, with which creates a life of value and contribution for us, and also creates a legacy that is a statement about what we did with our time and our talents in this pass through this dimension.
So what are some tips or strategies that a person who recognizes they've got this dual nature, if you will, and they want to move more towards developing that champion's mind? What are some simple things they might do to help them think that way and respond more often from that place?
Yeah, I think first off is to recognize that the biology that we have is hardwired into it, and we didn't ask for it. A lot of people think, well, that's just me. I just can't make good decisions. I'm always in conflict. Why am I repeating the same thing over and over again? There must be something wrong with me. Everybody else is okay, but I'm not. So they talk themselves out of their possibilities. So look, it's hardwired. We didn't ask for it as part of our biology. So let's be clear that that part of us we didn't ask for, but we do have a champion side that can prevail when we make the decisions that represent progress towards manifesting those things that are unique to us that we can contribute like to humanity. So like, let's say we're given an opportunity. Well, the human mindset, fear, would say, well, what do I stand to lose here? It's typical. Where the champion's mind would say, well, what do I stand to gain? So we kind of want to look at it, through optimistic expansion and possibility and creation. Again, given an accountability, the human mindset would probably say, well, I'm doing my best. Well, the champion doesn't think like that. The champion's way is I'll find a way to make it happen. I mean, why are we given ingenuity, creativity, and curiosity? I mean, those are all things there that allow us to contemplate paths to new and bigger, better that's unique to our ambitions. We could also look at fear. People could say, well, I feel fear, therefore I have to get over my fear before I take action. Well, no, you don't. It's like in the champion space, we all have a natural fear reflex. And it actually may be our friend, like saying, hey, don't do this. Stop, look around first, caution, maybe there's something you need to learn here before you actually leap. That's a possibility. We can't exclude that. Or it can be a biologic state of readiness where you have heightened senses to respond quickly in a situation where there is a certain level of performance anxiety. If that's the case, you just execute what has to go right, despite the fact that you may feel a little fear, because we can't control the fear side of it, but we can apply the solution that has to go right in the time, then it has to go right to execute it like correctly. Some other examples of this is that in the human mindset, the rigidity, we think, well, I have to be perfect. Well, wait a minute, who came up with that? It's like I had an athlete, well, he didn't contact me, but his country did, and said, look, this athlete's favored to win the gold medal. He's starting to unravel mentally. Can you help? And being an Olympian, I was naturally interested. So I talked with the athlete and I said, here's the deal. His name's Greg Rutherford. He was currently leading the world championship and favored to win the gold medal in 2.5 weeks' time. And I said, here's the problem, Greg, is that, you and your team, you guys think you got to be perfect and put in the perfect jump to do the long jump to win the gold medal. I'm saying so you guys are looking at every detail, thinking that you have to cover every detail to put in the perfect jump. And your mind is always making up another detail that you think you can't find. Therefore, you've already lost. It's not possible. I said, it's not about perfection. It's about doing the one or two things that count, like right now, because that's reality. So I just said, don't change your warm up and do your first 4 steps that'll set the right speed so your foot hits the board to get the lift to win the gold medal. 2 things for the next 2.5 weeks, you win the gold medal. It's like, wait a minute, you mean I don't have to be perfect? No, who said anything about being perfect? The perfection and the fear go together. And when we have fear, we don't think rationally. We don't. It's just a biologic fact. I mean, frontal cortex starts doing all sorts of weird stuff. And, neuroscience knows that. We've all heard that like only a million times. And so, there's that perfection myth. For sure, there's another kind of mythology in this. We think will and talent are enough. Well, no, they're not. It's really about your readiness, and it's about your restraint against the impulse to do what didn't work before. It's trusting your preparation and taking action on what you've proven to yourself to be true in your rehearsals to make things move forward. So I kind of hope that gives a contrasting view. One is really optimistic appropriately. It's proactive. It's what I call soft offense, where you're always kind of pressing forward on things. You're not being reckless, not a full court press, but you're not being a spectator waiting for things to somehow magically happen as we do in fear. Fear is like, I'm not ready yet. I just need another couple of weeks to get ready. It's probably, well, you probably don't. You're probably ready right now. It's just a matter of committing to it. So those are the practical nuts and bolts like side of this. And so I hope that provides some insight.
It does. And of course, everything you say triggers another question. This idea of rehearsing,
Yes.
Obviously the physical rehearsing for people in an athletic situation. What do you recommend as far as like visualization, the mental rehearsal? What role does that play in your coaching with people?
It's a secondary feature. The first feature is to be able to execute what has to go right in real time in rehearsal. For example, I had a woman in Canada who has 1,000 CEOs in her network, and every year she hosts a 2-day weekend event where people are recruited into and what creates her year revenue. And she said, Jeff, I have to give a 15-minute welcome address, and I'm not particularly eloquent. Can you help me do this? And I said, yeah, absolutely, I can. And so for her, the most important thing that she worked for 4 months on is walking from off stage to the podium gracefully and letting the audience clap. And then once they clap, I just said, you just need to say the first word that comes out of your mouth. It has to be the correct word. Then everything else is going to roll off your tongue because you already know all the material. And you say, well, wait a minute, 4 months for that? I said, yeah, because when you get the first domino to fall and you know you can do it, then everything else you believe is going to happen because you've already proven it to yourself that it could happen. So I'm a big fan. You do the rehearsals in a way that you've proven yourself in real time that you can actually do it. And when you know you can really do it in real time, then you can do it any place, any time, if you put your trust in your preparation when it comes time to performing. And most people don't. Like when I was a graduate student in an exam, everybody was in the hallway before the professor opened up the room, and they were quizzing each other, and they were looking at their notes, and I realized, what these people are doing is that they're putting all their belief in the 5% they don't know will be the thing that makes them pass the test. Why would they be doing that? And so at the end of the test, everybody was changing all the right answers, the wrong answers, because they were confused. You've seen that sort of obsession, right? Where we start to over rehearse and over rehearse. I had exactly the same thing with a woman that wanted to pass her medical exam entrance to the residency of her choice. It's a very exhaustive, you get one chance to do a test. And I said, it's not about the information because you already know it. It's about the rhythm of taking the test, getting into the rhythm and the flow of the test. So again, another example is that if you know the information, you're not going to forget the information. It's going to be your presence of being that allows what you already know to execute itself. And if you've proven it in rehearsal and you trust your rehearsal and you don't try to change at the last second, which everybody tries to do, for some reason, I think that there's a magic potion that they can make it better in the last second, which isn't really true. Another myth. Then they usually pull it off perfectly because they're trusting what they already know to be true.
That's
And then let me add one thing to this too. And then you can do your mental rehearsals, but you can actually put yourself in the real situation because you've already done it. So you can kinesthetically feel yourself there. So then when you get there for real, you know what it feels like to execute it correctly because it's not cerebral. I remember just one more story, if I may, is that like I was presenting to 4,000 of the brightest high school students on the planet. And the most important question I got, most frequent question was, I can't get up and talk in front of a group. What's the problem? I said, well, do you know the material? They say, yes, I know it. I got all A pluses on every test I've ever taken. I said, do you rehearse? No. Well, I said, well, knowing the material versus presenting it are two different worlds. So again, we can kind of see that, remember, memory is just isn't in the brain. I mean, neuroscientists, they know that. It's a property of the entire body. So when we have rehearsed something, there's an inherent knowledge and innate wisdom of the pacing and the integration of all the parts and how it needs to feel to be executed correctly. But we can't think our way to a place that we haven't experienced yet. And that's why the rehearsal is really important. So I hope that gives some insight.
It does. It's very powerful. And I also want to go back to a couple of other things. One is this concept that you talked about a little bit ago, receivership,
Yes.
this slowing down and receiving. I love your perspective on that. And for people like me that are doers, we feel like we've got our to-do list and our task list, and we move through from one thing to another. Talk about the benefits of moving into a receivership state, and what does that look like in practice?
A couple things here is that like to-do lists are kind of a trap, actually. I think that if we're always doing the one or two things that count, that everything else is dependent upon, and that's always shuffling itself moment by moment, then we're really taking action on real time, because some of the things that we think that we should be doing maybe have now become obsolete, that we don't even need to spend time doing, quite honestly. And so on the receivership side of it, it's the bigger idea, and it's the path and the sequence. It's not the detail necessarily itself. So when we look at receivership, that's where we open our mind, body, hearts, souls, and spirits to be able to receive insights and revelations that can spontaneously show up in our conscious awareness. And so if we are consciously aware, meaning that we're, remember in Gokus, we are maybe doing something, but simultaneously we have an awareness of what's happening in the periphery where the real gold is, then we have access to being able to receive those things. And generally, these untapped potentials that are revealed are when we're in proximity to certain people, places, and things. And it can be like a tool, it could be an idea, and it can be an action. And as long as we stay in receivership, where we're kind of listening with our mind, heart, body, soul, and spirit, that's more closely related to the better options than our presumption of trying to jam and trying to push and force something through that we think that we need, which perhaps we don't need at all.
Mm-hmm. That slowing down is what you're really talking about, making space for
It is.
this kind of not just reflection, but openness.
Correct. You're not consciously thinking about a thing. We're in receivership of a gift being shown to us and acknowledging it. And kind of, for me, the important part about receivership and why it works for us is that if we stand in receivership, and kind of the promise is in the petition for insight and wisdom is that everything that shows up in our consciousness, we will evaluate its merits faithfully. We will not decide in advance the merits of anything. We will look at everything as a possibility, and where there is what I call a resonant recognition, meaning that when something shows up that we have a resonance with, meaning that our enthusiasm increases, our belief goes from I believe I can do it to knowing I can do it. We know we have the right thing at the right time because of our heightened awareness, then that informs us that that's the action that we should be considering taking. So again, it's when in doubt, receivership. It's really interesting because with my clients, one of the hardest things is for them to give themselves permission to test the hypothesis that I don't need to be everywhere all the time, in fear I'll miss the opportunity that's going to make the true difference. Because that's what people do. They think, well, I'm here all the time, I'm not going to be deemed as worthy of an insight. The universe will think that I'm being too lax and don't appreciate it enough, don't put enough trust in it. People won't think that I care enough because I'm not there killing myself every 2 seconds. There's a lot of mythology that surrounds this that is directly derived from the human mindset, survival biology, for sure. So I actually do this. Like, I had a client who had a chance to go to Iceland. I said, I think you should do it. And he said, well, no, I can't do that because I'm going to be away from the office. And my daughter will think I'm abandoning her and she would want me to be at her soccer game. I said, well, look, hold on a second here. It's like, probably number one, since you're the CEO, your people would kind of love you to be not in the office so that they could get their stuff done, right? And without you being there, and you need to prove to yourself that you don't need to be there. And your daughter needs to understand that, you have certain responsibilities to other people, and she needs to know that you're always going to come back. And you have to test this hypothesis, because if you don't test it, you're never going to know. And you're going to continue indefinitely thinking about what you're thinking to be true when it's not. So I went to Iceland, came back, said, well, what happened? He said, oh man, we had the best reunion with my wife. Oh my God, the productivity stats were up off the charts when I went back to work and looked at the numbers and stuff. It just couldn't have gone better. So what'd you learn from this? Well, what I need to be doing as the leader in chief, I need to be out there in receivership, getting the bigger ideas to come back to be the face of this and to be the inspirational leader and bring something of intense value that can rally the team and let the team do what they do best. I said, you got it. So you have to kind of look at this as a business imperative. If golfing is where you do it, well, then you got to get a country club membership. Don't fool yourself. If you do this better because you're traveling every quarter for a week with your family, well, then you got to do it. This is a business imperative. It's not discretionary, like in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful example. And as I was listening to you to describe that, I thought the effective leaders would also encourage their people to do this as well.
100%.
Right? And
100%.
So how do you help these leaders? Because it's one thing to get there themselves. Is it then an easier step to have them see the value of allowing others to also find their state of receiver? Yes. Or best
yeah,
place?
Because I mean, again, our presence of being is directly related to our personal experience with life itself. We can't live one way and talk another way. It just isn't going to work like that. So when we see the liberation that we get in terms of our effectiveness and how we show up, we're fresh, we're lucid, we're enthusiastic, we're infectious, we have new and innovative ideas. You can't get there by staying stuck in too much proximity, thinking that your value is an overall time. It isn't. It's like, where are you spending your time for what, and what is your job, and what do you need to bring for other people to do their job, so that all the parts that make up the whole are working together in synchronicity and coherence, because that's where exponential productivity happens, because people are happy, they have a vision of big, things are changing appropriately, and they now not only believe that they can do it, but they know they know that they can do it because of the strong leadership that brings back to them a sobriety of thought. So, for me, that's an essential element that leadership does need to bring. And I'll say that every business, every situation has its own best way of doing that, but there's always a way to do that. And there's always a way to honor that as well, appropriately. So people think that they're appreciated. They think that they're understood. They know that their value is being embraced. They know that their expertise is being utilized in an effective way. And if we can bring what I call allegiance capital to the people that we work with, then it's all about harmony. Harmony creates exponential output. Without harmony, pushing harder can't get you beyond that threshold. You're going to be stuck playing at the sum of the parts. You can never go beyond that. Not possible.
Mm. And what role does this idea of imposter syndrome have in all of this? Because I have heard you speak about this, and it's different than what you typically hear that phrase defined or referred to as.
Well, thanks for saying that. Yeah, imposter syndrome to me, imposter syndrome is where we identify with the human mindset biology, our survival biology, and we think that that's us. Well, it kind of is us from a survival perspective, and the biology is hardwired into us that you can't shut it off over a lifetime. And we are responsible for how we align with that. But to me, that's the imposter. And if we believe that that person is us as the creator of all things good and distinct, then we're in trouble, because we will talk ourselves out of our full potential every time. We have to realize that as a human, part of us, again, is survival, hardwired. We didn't ask for it. It's on 24 hours a day. It requires so much grace and acceptance and forgiveness of self to recognize that that is not a deliberate choice that we make to do that. That's hardwired biology. But we do have the instinct side of things, the seeking side, that we can align with. And when we align with that seeking side, that's about full potential play. And that's where manifestation of our purpose on this planet can actually take place. So again, let's be really clear on what the imposter is. Again, it's like the survival us that we believe is the real us. Well, it sort of is, but the real us in terms of our contribution in the life that we can live is going to be the seeker self. There's no doubt about it. And I'll say one other thing here, if I can, is that
Sure.
Since this is hardwired, you can't shut this off over a lifetime. And so therefore, all the gains that we make in terms of the seeker side of ourself, where we're manifesting our potential, we're living a life of joy, we're living a life of meaning and purpose, that has to be continuously applied. Because if it's not continuously applied, it never self-perpetuates. We always then start to backslide back into the old pattern. Yeah, well, the old pattern is biology that's hardwired, is what that really is. So again, this is the kind of chess game that we need to be mindful of. But the good news is that when we make gains, we don't need to work as hard to keep what we got as we did to get there in the first place. So once we get this all sort of worked out, then we can kind of cruise control it and turn the dials to make sure that we hold that sweet spot, forevermore moving forward.
Mm-hmm. One of the themes that's kind of running through this conversation is this idea of our full potential.
Yes.
And of course, you as a coach help people see how much further they can really go. For those that aren't working with a coach and have their beliefs about what's possible for them, what are some things we could do to challenge ourselves to think beyond what we're seeing as an outer limit, let's say, of our potential?
Great question. Yeah, for me, I feel like, as I said earlier, untapped potentials get revealed by proximity. It's like untapped potentials are there. We just don't see it, and it's something that's dormant that needs to be awakened is what it really is, because it's already in us. It just needs to be awakened. We just don't know that. So spending regular time with different people, places, and things are important, because when we're in proximity to circumstances, something may happen that demonstrates a potential that we now see that we didn't know that we had. And so therefore, yeah, I mean, you could read books, you could attend programs, you could be in proximity of people, but the idea is that if we're stuck in our own head, we're probably not going to discover the untapped potential. It's always going to come from some type of interface with a people, place, or thing that, again, arose a possibility that we saw. Because remember, when we see an untapped potential, as I mentioned earlier, there's a resonant recognition. Resonant means there's an energy exchange and an awakening and a recognition that this is something there that could be mine if I did it. And so that's why, to me, kind of a steady diet of exposure to different, because if you're steeped doing the same thing all the time, same people, then you're reducing the possibility of having one of those interfaces where that magic thing is said or that magic thing is observed, where there's that recognition that, hey, this is what I've been missing. So that's what I feel is something that's should be on everybody's kind of calendar, to-do list.
It makes me think about the known versus the unknown.
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is we can stay restricted by sticking with only what we know, and how can we challenge ourselves to step out in one form or another, whether it is a person, place, thing, action that we haven't ever taken before, and that helps us expand into a newer, different area.
Yeah, 100%. Because, we can't self-reflect beyond our own blind spots. That has to be called out in some other way. And what I do know is that there's only one of us in all of creation. There's no another Meredith. There's not another Jeff in all of creation. So we all have a capacity to do something of immense value, to create a life of enrichment, but also contribute to other people. It's just a matter of finding out like what that is. And I feel like a very important part in that is not deciding the value and the merits of what we believe our life is and our contribution. I think that, our comparisons with ourselves with other people's is a fast way to talk us out of initiative and belief in our bigger future. So, again, the idea of being around people, places, and things, and I would make it a stretch also. If it's something that you're a little nervous about, it's probably the right thing. I kind of feel like you need to schedule nervousness or maybe a little bit of fear on the calendar. Like, oh my God, I don't know. I went to a men's society meeting once just because I'd never been there, and I went there and there were guys playing, 10 games of chess with themselves and doing physics questions and stuff. And when I went in there, I was like, man, these guys are all brainiacs and here I am, just me. But I found that, what, this was all a story I had in my head. And here I am. I like these people. This is really fun to be around this. So I think that if we kind of take what we believe to be true and we test it against reality, we have just a tremendous opportunity to see how much we discount our abilities, because that's what human nature does. If we're in survival, we're going to naturally go back to that testing, in graduate school. Everybody put all their confidence in their ability to lose. That's what they did. They put all their confidence in their ability to lose. And, to me, that's what human mindset does. We really believe more in our ability to lose than we do in our ability to win. And we got to change that. We need to challenge that. We need to override that, because all it is, that's kind of mental BS is what it is. But until such time as we experience it and we get familiar with it and we feel like we have a power above it, then we stay enmeshed and entangled in that nasty web.
A key piece, we haven't really said this word, but it's so obvious, this levels of awareness,
Yes.
raising our awareness to notice when we might be falling into the human mindset versus the expansion of the champion mind. I think that's a key piece of the whole process.
It is. It is. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because again, receivership creates the pause that allows awareness to reveal itself. Because quite honestly, the awareness is always there. The circumstances are always there. It's the fog that gets between us and it, which is usually being hyper focused, trying to get somewhere too quick, believing that if I don't get there, then I would get left behind. The usual list of fear-based survival ideas and myths that we believe to be true. But if we truly take that pause, where again, we put our mind, body, heart, soul, and spirit in a state of receivership, not in pursuit, but in receivership of, then we've kind of cut off at the paths, that foggy link that allows things to be able to land. So you're 100% correct.
Our ability to hear, see, sense,
yes,
and recognize those insights that are given to us. That reminds me of one final thing, because we could talk for another hour, I know, Jeff. One of the things I love is your distinction between setting a goal, because you said you don't set goals anymore. You respond to callings. And I would love for you to talk about that distinction.
That's been my entire life, actually. I realized early on that when I set goals, they were only what my conscious awareness could conceive of. And I found that to be incredibly limiting by a factor of about 1 million. And I learned that really most doing my artwork, because I realized, when I was working on a piece of art and I had the idea of what I wanted to create, if I stood in receivership of a better option that presented itself while I was in the moment of creation, it would end up being something that was exponentially beyond anything I ever thought I could possibly produce. But I was just there listening to the opportunity presented, and I took that. So I realized that if all I do is reproduce what I can see, then I become a technician. I'm no longer an artist or a creator. And so I've always been like that. The Olympics chose me. I didn't choose it. The glass chose me. I mean, it's been that way my whole life. And I'll add another extra, I think, important point to this is that when we stand in receivership and we look at answering callings, callings are very personal specific. And it's always an easier path because I found that you always have enough energy to do anything when it occurs and is gifted naturally to us. But where the aging accelerator gets pushed to the floor is when we feel like we're behind and we're desperate to try to catch up and get ahead, and we're pushing way too hard to try to get somewhere too quick. The frustration and the fear that go hand in hand, the two F's go hand in hand there. It's just a pro-aging accelerator is what it is that leads to, as I said earlier, 3 problems that usually happen in their late 30s, early 40s. That's what I call the zone of doom. That's where there's a catastrophic health event, heart attack or a stroke, pushing too hard, too fast, too long, thinking that everything's okay. We knew it wasn't, but somehow we thought we could outrun it. Or it would be like a relationship failure. People are tired of the promise of, once I get to where I want to get to, things are going to change. Well, they've heard that for 20 years now and they're tired of that. So boom, relationship blows up. Or it could be financial ruin. I got to get back what I need to get because I promised myself I'd retire by 50 and I'm not there yet. So I got to go all in. So I do something and risk or do something risky. It's not a good idea. All of this, in my opinion, is mythology because there's no substantive basis or evidence that works out particularly well. Yeah, it tickles our survival self because the survival self wants a shortcut more than anything. It'll pay anything for a shortcut, but that's not how it works. It's being really efficient through receivership is the shortcut because the receivership is giving you the steps that catapult you further, faster with less energy and effort. So
that's so powerful. In fact, everything you've said in our conversation today is profound. And I want to thank you for the gift of you.
well, that's very, very generous.
And to my listeners, because this is one of those conversations that to me is worth going back and re-listening to, because each person who does that, I think, will be in a different place the next time they listen to it, and they'll be able to hear different things. You shared an amazing amount of valuable information on how we can best live our lives fully and have the possibility of really living into, I don't even want to say achieving our potential, but living into it so that there is always something beyond where we are that's possible.
Always. Yeah, you said that so eloquently well, because really, potential, every moment has its perfect potential response, but potential, it's an evolution over a lifetime that we never complete. We never quite get to that finish line. And just to say that everything that I've shared, with you has been through practical experience that I've seen enough times to know that what I'm saying has a historical basis to it. And also to say that because there's only one of us in all of creation, every one of us matters in a really big way. And when we align our assets and our innate possibility with our energy and how we develop and what we stand for, then we make our unique contribution to humanity that lives on for all of eternity for what we did with our time and our talents. So, and to be mindful, there's always room at the top for the best. And our top is what we decide it to be. It's not the yardstick that other people make it. So thank you again for your very generous offer to spend this very sacred time with you and your audience, Merit. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I love that, Jeff. Sacred time indeed. It really was. Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free Facilitator Guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.